three-legged this morning. That'll be the way I am this morning. Okay, we are in Mark chapter 1, and the accompanying passage is Luke chapter 4. Visiting with us, we're studying through the Gospels, looking at the life of Christ, and trying to look at parallel passages as we do so. And this morning it's Mark 1, beginning verse 21, and then Luke chapter 4, beginning with verse 31. We'll be floating back and forth between those particular passages there this morning as we study together. Last week we looked at the first call of the four Peter, Andrew, James, and John, who were to be, I guess, the foundation or the nucleus of the 12 apostles as they were called by Jesus Christ. And we spent some time, at least, thinking about the type of men that Jesus chose and noting that likely they would not have been on our list. And the struggle that we have many times in looking at individuals, and sometimes, although we would like not to admit it, that sometimes some prejudice comes in. And also the fact that we are so very conscious of the outward appearance. We are so locked in on the way folks look and the way that maybe they present themselves, that there are times when likely we are missing an invitation, we're missing an opportunity to talk to someone about their soul because we prejudge the situation. So when we look at Jesus selecting these old rough fishermen, who likely didn't look too good, didn't smell too good, definitely didn't have the education that others would have. There were some of the selections, maybe with Matthew, maybe a couple of others, where there may have been a better educational background, but we're not sure about that. And when you come to the final of the apostles, the Apostle Paul, who was one, as he said, called out of due season, he was very highly educated and was a very intelligent individual, and thus the biggest part of the New Testament written by that particular man. So we know if it wasn't education or lack of education, it wasn't where they grew up or where they didn't grow up. It had nothing to do with who their parents were. It had to do with the quality of the person and the person's heart. And obviously Jesus could look within and know that heart, and we're not able to do that. So it should make us even more conscious of not making a judgment call on a person's character, at least not until we have talked and investigated and studied and learned the whole truth. Well, that brought us down to where we were working when our time ran out last week, and that is this passage that Eric read for us here just a minute ago about Jesus in Capernaum. And you remember we noted that now Capernaum was the base location of Jesus throughout the rest of his ministry. He was pretty much rejected in Nazareth, his hometown, and that was because he would not perform as many miracles there. They were more concerned about the miraculous, they were more concerned about the show than they were about the teaching. So what you have here is Jesus moving his center of teaching and the location to this particular place here. So he is in Capernaum, and that's where he's going to operate from pretty much throughout his ministry. We'll find him making these trips to Jerusalem quite often, and yet it is Capernaum. For those of you that just walked in, we're in Mark 1:21. in Luke chapter 4, verse 31, the basis of our study this morning. It's interesting here in Mark's passage that one of the things that the audience noticed when Jesus stood up to read or teach there in the synagogue, and by the way, we noted that that was something that was very common. It was a common practice of that day for a visitor to be able to read or to speak. And the Apostle Paul and others really used this to their advantage. They would go on the Sabbath day to the synagogues, knowing that this Jewish population would show up, and thus they had a ready audience. And they also knew of this particular custom. Well, Jesus was using the custom as well. So, but what they noticed that was different was Jesus spoke as one having authority, in contrast to the way that the rabbis, the teachers, normally did. What they would do, and this may be overstating it a little bit, but it was more like, at least in my mind, that the rabbis would speak more from a commentary. They would speak more from the standpoint of the rabbis and the accumulation of their evaluations and their comments and their deductions on the Scriptures. And so, it was not as one having authority, but one in making reference to the original authority or the particular rabbis that maybe they had learned from or studied from. So Jesus comes in and he begins to speak and teach, and it's obvious from the way he talks and even likely from the tone that he is speaking as one with the authority. Now, today we can speak and must speak with authority, but it's the authority that comes from the Scriptures itself. We have no authority within ourselves except the authority that God has given to us by giving us the Scriptures and giving us the right and also the charge to preach and teach the gospel. So the authority is not within us. The authority obviously is within the preached word, which comes from Jesus and comes from the inspired writers. So from that standpoint, we can speak, as it were, with the authority of God. Also, in reference to the miracles, which was a part of what was taking place here and part of the discussion, we noted last week, I think, in closing, that the miracles had generated great public amazement. The miracles had drawn a lot of crowds. But this aspect of the ministry of Christ was very small. We may, in reading about these different miraculous accounts, we might assume that everywhere that Jesus went, on practically every occasion, that he performed a miracle. But that was simply not the case. There were times when it says that he healed everybody that came. He performed these miracles, and on certain occasions he didn't turn anybody down. But that aspect of his ministry is going to diminish, and particularly after the good confession that Peter made that's recorded in Matthew 16, where Jesus is asking, what are men saying about me? Who do they say that I am? And they noted, some saying you're one of the prophets or Elijah or whatever. And then he says, who do you say that I am? And Peter, of course, makes that great confession that he was the Christ, the Son of God. From that particular point, it seems that Jesus worked very few miracles. They were important to establish his authority. They were important to make sure that folks knew that he was the Christ, the Son of God, and those that were honest could see that. They knew that these miraculous things that Jesus did could not have been done without the backing of God. But they were counterproductive in the sense that people came just for that. The same thing with the feeding of the 4,000 and the 5,000. Folks were hungry, they needed to eat, and yet it was counterproductive in the fact that they just came to eat. And we joked about that, haven't we? We talk about the fact that, when we have a dinner, we have a bigger crowd. Well, to some degree, that's true. We talked about the fact that, we can only get together unless we eat. Well, most of us like to eat, right? Yes, it can be counterproductive. And yet what Jesus was working towards, and hopefully what we are working towards, is the fact that we recognize that, those types of things are a sideline. They may add to, they may contribute in some way. But those are not the really point of what is taking place. We also have here in this particular text the idea of an unclean spirit. And it seems that as this was used by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, there seems to have been a contrast between the Holy Spirit and the unclean spirit to distinguish between that which is from God and that which is not from God. There's also a distinction made between those that were demon-possessed and those that were actually sick. We're in Mark verse 32 here on down in this particular chapter, I think it is. I'm still in Mark where I was, Mark chapter 1. Yeah, I'm still in Mark chapter 1. Go back and forth and I get mixed up. It says, at evening when the sun had set, they brought them all who were sick and those that were demon-possessed. It was two different groups. Now, who were these demons? Well, actually, they were the spirits of the departed dead. And they had a desire to inhabit a body, and it seems that they were allowed to during this limited period of time. Don't know exactly how long this lasted, but it seemed to have lasted during the time when miracles could be performed, and doesn't seem to have gone past that. One of the reasons that it may have been allowed is to prove the power of Jesus over demons or spirits, and of course their leader behind them, of course, would have been Satan. But this amazed these people when they observed that Jesus had the power even over these unclean spirits, as they called them, those that were demon-possessed or whatever. One interesting thing about this, there have been a lot of movies that talk about demon possession and all that kind of stuff. But unlike what has been portrayed today and what even some religious leaders claim to do today, Jesus didn't use any incantations, any rituals, or magical paraphernalia. He simply commands and the spirits obey. The demons knew who Jesus was, as this one did. They knew his identity, and they knew that someday they would be judged by him. And they recognized that and actually had more respect for him than others had who should have known better. Anybody with a thought or comment there on that? We're throwing out a lot of ideas there, of course, this morning. I would suspect that because of their, at one point, these folks had lived and then had gone into the spirit realm, and being in that spirit realm in Hades, then it was just like in Luke chapter 16 with the rich man and Lazarus. When they got there, they recognized the Lord, they recognized Abraham, so they were aware of who the river was. They would be not thinking about that. The question was, if you didn't hear it, how did they know who Jesus was? Anybody else with a thought there? Okay, our next passage, we're going to go to Matthew chapter 8. And again, what we're trying to do is keep up with these things in the order here as they were actually happening. In Matthew chapter 8, beginning with verse 14. Matthew 8:14. Then we're going to go back earlier in Matthew and then on to Mark and Luke. Matthew 8:14. Now when Jesus had come into Peter's house, he saw his wife's mother lying sick with a fever. So he touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she arose and served them. Now when evening had come, they brought to him many who were demon-possessed, and he cast out the spirits with the word, and healed all who were sick. Again, we see the distinguishing between sick people and those that were demon-possessed. That it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, He himself took our infirmities and bore our sicknesses. So what was taking place was according to the prophecy that had been made about it. So here we have, of course, the healing of Peter's mother-in-law as well as others. We think about the tour that he made in Galilee in this section, and also the second call of Peter, Andrew, James, and John. One of the things, if you have been, or if you get an opportunity to travel to Israel and go up north of Israel to Galilee, they have excavated this particular home. And all the evidence points to the fact that it is actually Peter's house. They found fish hooks and other types of things, but they got a little sign out in front of it. Of course, there's nothing left except a lot of the rocks and the earthwork with the foundation. But it's obviously one of the more popular places there in Capernaum for you to visit. And Peter's house was pretty good size. Peter likely was not a wealthy individual, but he did have his own boats, his own company, and seemingly had people working for him. So he had a larger house than a lot of these folks likely would have. In Mark chapter 1, in verse 33, it talks about the gathering that came together on the outside. So it was a larger place maybe than a lot of the homes there, and it could accommodate, I guess, a larger group. Also, it's interesting to note that Peter was indeed a married man, and that sort of flies in the face of some religious groups that would say that their religious leaders should not be married. Peter was. And obviously, if you got a mother-in-law, they come with the wives, right? Some folks try to avoid that, but that's just the way it is. If you got a wife, you end up with a mother-in-law. And he had one, and she was sick here. And it's interesting that just with a simple touch, Jesus caused her fever to go away. And it's very obvious in contrast to so-called miracles today. A person is maybe in a wheelchair and somebody claims to heal that person, and they get up, and they may get up out of that wheelchair, but they're still going to walk with a limp, aren't they? Here, what did she do? Well, let's back up. Have you ever had a really bad fever and the fever finally broke? When that happened, how'd you feel? Oh man, you was washed out, wasn't you? I mean, you are so tired now, you want to just, lay there and sleep. What'd she do? She got up and went to work, didn't she? So here is just a simple little difference between the miracles that Jesus performed. It's like the lame man that Peter and John, healed there at the gate. He'd been there all of his life, but he jumped up. And he began to jump and dance around. I can't imagine never being able to walk, but I think we'd all be jumping and hopping, wouldn't we? So it was indeed in contrast to so-called miracles that are performed today. So Here was a lady that was sick, and of course, disease was a result of sin, or the consequences of sin, going all the way back to the Garden of Eden. That Jesus had power over sin, and he also had the power over the one behind it, as we would funnel this thing all the way back to Satan and his deception. He could deal with whatever the problem was. He had the power to do that. Anybody with a thought there, a comment there? Okay, I want us to jump back to Matthew 4 for just a second. Matthew 4 and verse 23. This is all during the same period of time. Jesus went about all Galilee, teaching in the synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing all kinds of sickness and all kinds of disease among the people. So, you have basically what Jesus was about. He was teaching and preaching, that he was healing sickness and all kinds of diseases. Then his fame went throughout all Syria, and they brought to him all sick people that were afflicted with various diseases and torments, and those who were demon-possessed, epileptics and paralytics, and he healed them. Great multitudes followed him from Galilee and from the Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and beyond the Jordan. So this is all during this same period of time where Jesus is working there in Galilee with Capernaum as the center of what he's doing. Now, flip over to Mark chapter 1. In Mark chapter 1, beginning with verse 29. Mark chapter 1, beginning with verse 29. Now, as soon as they come out of the synagogue, they entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. So here you have the four. But Simon's wife's mother lay sick with a fever, and they told him about her at once. So he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up. Immediately the fever left her, and she served them. At evening, when the sun had set, they brought to him all who were sick and those who were demon-possessed, and the whole city was gathered together at the door. Again, indicating that the house was a pretty good-sized house with the crowd that came together and gathered there at the door. Then he healed many, verse 34, who were sick with various diseases, and cast out many demons, and he did not allow the demons to speak because they knew him. Likely that was because of the fact that if these crowds continued to grow, then it would be almost impossible. Sort of like these movie stars today. They got a lot of money, but they can't go anywhere without a bodyguard. In a lot of places they can't even go because people just stampede the place. Everybody wants to see it, want to shake their hands, and that type of thing. So they're very limited. With their fame and with their money and with their influence, there's a downside to that. Well, Jesus faced that as well. There were times when, you remember the scripture says that they didn't have time to rest. They didn't have time to eat part of the time because of the multitudes that continued to come and they continued to grow. In fact, you look on down to verse 35. Now in the morning, having risen a long time before daylight, he went out and departed to a solitary place, and there he prayed. So basically, even Jesus had to have a time out there once in a while, didn't he? He had to get away from the crowds. He had to take some time off where he could be to himself. And we find numerous examples of that. In Luke chapter 5, verse 16, Luke chapter 6 and verse 14, and then in Matthew chapter 14 and verse 23 are three other references made to the fact that Jesus would slip away, whether it was in the middle of the night or whenever he could slip off and go out and be by himself where he would have a time to talk to the Father and maybe just to catch his breath and maybe take a nap. I think it indicates to us with Jesus as our example that we need to work at that as well. We need to find time to turn the television off to slow things down. And with you, with your life, it might be, at 4 o'clock in the morning as well. Some of the older preachers that I first grew to admire a lot, especially when I first started preaching, it was interesting how many of them would get up and do their personal study at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And I suspect that it somewhat because of this reason. They were so busy with everything else and working in a congregation with visiting and that type of thing. Plus, they felt that they were sharper. They could think better early in the morning. But found time to just dig into the Word of God, to study it without all the noise, without all the distractions, and to go to God in prayer. And Jesus, of course, sets the example here. So his fame was growing. People were learning about him. And that was what needed to happen. And yet at the same time, there was a downside to that as well because of the crowds that came. Let's just continue reading there, verse 35 of Mark chapter 1. Verse 36, and Simon and those who were with him searched for him. So he slipped away from everybody and tell anybody where he was going. You think about doing that? I don't tell nobody where you're going. And then they start calling your cell phone and it rings right beside them. So you left that thing there too. Don't take your cell phone. Verse 37, but when they found him, they said to him, everyone is looking for you. But he said to them, let us go into the next towns. And this is the point I want to make. Let us go into the next towns that I may preach there also, because for this purpose I have come forward. So it was that the preaching, that was the focus, that was the emphasis. And we need to be very conscious of that today. And maybe Vacation Bible School is a good example. What you want is a program that brings interest, that brings excitement, but in amongst all of that, you've got to get the children and all of us for that matter into the Word of God, because that's the point. The point isn't to bring a group of children and adults together to have a good time, right? Everything that we do, from the decorations to the cookies that are eaten, to everything that's done, to characters that are dressed in costume, if that doesn't all funnel back, all funnel down, and this week we're studying Abraham and Sarah, right? If everything doesn't focus back on those characters and the life that they lived and the faith that they had, and how they handled their problems and how they dealt with life, then we wasted a lot of time and effort and money in having, a Vacation Bible School. The same thing that is true in any of our services or any of our activities. Everything that we do needs to have the bottom line as an opportunity to teach and preach. We do things to open doors or to open hearts. And the intention of that, again, is not just to make people feel good or make people feel welcome, but it is to give us an opportunity to preach and teach the gospel. And that should be the purpose for all of us. When we visit somebody, when we're encouraging somebody, when we're writing a note or sending a card, the bottom line is to get an opportunity to preach and to teach. And Jesus, of course, being the Son of God, as is noted here, did not lose that focus. He was focused in on exactly what needed to be done. Look at Matthew chapter 19 for just a second. Matthew chapter 19 and verse 16. Well, we might back up verse 13. Little children were being brought to him, and he was laying hands on them. And verse 15 says he left that place. Verse 16, now behold, one came and said to him, Good teacher, what good thing shall I do that I may have eternal life? So here, this was the point. Here was an individual that wanted to know what to do to have eternal life. What do I need to do to be saved? And that was the mission of Jesus, to point folks to eternal life. Point folks to what they needed to do in order to have their sins taken away. And that is what Jesus was focused in on his way. Anybody with a thought there? And I think that to balance that thing is the challenge. That to balance it out, I hope that you feel good being here. Right? We should feel good about being in worship. We should be excited. It should be sort of getting away. We don't have the doors locked, but hopefully the world is outside. We're in here, right? And it is enjoyable and it's comforting that you know that you can come in here and you're not going to hear some four-letter word that shouldn't be used. You're not going to hear a dirty joke. We've kind of got away from the fighting and the feuding of the world. And it's comforting and it's exciting to be able to do that. It's exciting to be able to open our Bibles and be reminded of things that we've forgotten, or to be encouraged to do what we know we need to do, or to find some nugget that maybe we hadn't seen before. So you're exactly right. And we can enjoy ourselves. We can smile. We can celebrate. And yet at the same time, we do that with a reverence and a respect. So church don't have to be boring and dull, right? It can be exciting. Yes. So two weddings, but completely different, right? One where drinking was sort of the standard in the bar, and the other that was foreign to it. And so yes, and getting that across because of the media, and you don't have to watch television for just a very few minutes, almost with any show. I know, believe me, I like to watch. In December, the Hallmark Channel puts on a lot of these, different shows, and they're pretty decent. But I noticed even with them, when they have a meal, it's absolutely with a glass of wine, even in those particular shows. But my point being, the television pretty much promotes drinking and other activities they're foreign to what the Bible says. But the message is that you can't have a good time without that. You can't have a good time without a beer in your hand. You can't have really enjoy life without sexual activities outside of the marriage vows. And of course, it's a lie. It's not true at all. And so, as we think about that, and we think about, what we're all about, what our focus needs to be, we need to recognize that there are a lot of things that can detract from that. But Christian people can enjoy life and have a good time without drinking and so forth and so on. Good point. Anybody else with a thought there? Yes. Come and follow me and be what I am. Good point. Okay. Luke chapter 5. Luke chapter 5. So we'll jump to here for a second, the last in this particular section. And again, these are things that happened basically at the same time. So we're jumping back, and as I've noted, one writer will mention it, another will not. But in Luke chapter 5, beginning in verse 1. So it was as the multitude pressed about to hear the word of God that he stood by the lake of Gennesaret. He saw two boats standing at the lake, but the fishermen had gone from them and were washing their nets. By the way, the lake of Gennesaret, the lake of Sea of Galilee, different terminologies used for that, what your translation may say. But this is the second call. Okay, he's already called Peter, Andrew, James, and John, but this is the second time that that's going to take place. So he saw the two boats, the fishermen gone from them, washing their nets. Then he got into one of the boats, which was Simon's, and asked him to put out a little from the land. He sat down and taught the multitudes of the boat. Then he stopped speaking, and he said to Simon, launch out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch. Now Simon answered and said, Master, we've worked all night, caught nothing. Nevertheless, at your word, I will let down the net. I think already here you see some growth in Simon Peter. He says, we've been fishing all night, been a waste of time, but he says, nevertheless, at your word. There are times when we are studying our Bible and we're told to do something, and it may not make sense to us. We may not understand. It's sort of this adage of give and should have given to you. What kind of sense does that make? As human beings, the idea is if you want to have more, you just get more. The Bible concept is if you want to have more, you give more. That's crazy, isn't it? It works. It works. There are a lot of other things the Bible will tell us to do that, first off, from a human standpoint, doesn't make a bit of sense in the world. We have to grow and develop, and I think that Simon or Peter here has already begun to do that. Verse 6, and when they had done this, they caught a great number of fish. Their net was breaking. So the signals of their partners, so you got Peter, Andrew, James, and John all working together here. They came, they filled both boats, so that they began to sink. And Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' feet, saying, depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. Now, that is a very similar passage to Isaiah chapter 6. Isaiah chapter 6, you remember, this is where the Lord called Isaiah. And Isaiah said, I'm a man of unclean lips, remember? And he was unworthy. And they took a coal of fire and touched it to his lips and clean. And he ended up by saying, the Lord saying, who will go? And Isaiah said, here am I, send me. So what you find is an interesting significance between what's happening particularly with Peter here and what happened with Isaiah back in Isaiah chapter 6. Verse 9 says, for he and all who were with him were astonished to catch a fish that they had taken. And so also were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon, do not be afraid, for now you will catch men. So when they had brought their boats to land, they forsook all and followed him. Powerful passage. They forsook all. They left everything and they began now to be fishers of men, no longer working at their particular trades. And that will be brought into the picture along the way as they travel with Jesus. And their full focus now is no longer fishing on the Sea of Galilee, truly being involved in the ministry that Jesus was preparing him for. I think our time is gone. Anybody have a comment? Exactly, the difference between the two. Good point.